Hello, and welcome to the 108 podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Raquel.
And we're the Type 1 Together girls.
We are stripping down life with type 1 diabetes from two people who live different versions of it every single day. Please remember, Type 1 Together does not give medical advice. We are only sharing from personal experience.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 108 podcast. I'm so excited today to have Ethan here, who you all might remember not only from his original episode on the 108 podcast, which I will link that episode in our show notes if you're someone who wants to go back and listen. Maybe you haven't heard his story yet, but you also have probably seen him all over our page. He's joined the Type 1 Together team and has been helping with videos and Mental Health Mondays and the Mental Health Monday calls. So you're seeing more and more of Ethan, and we all love it. So Ethan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we are going to dive in today to basically what the last 18 months has taught Ethan about being a Type 1 parent in a way. His daughter has now reached that 18-month mark of living with Type 1, and he's going to share how things are now different than maybe he expected in the earlier days. So I think we're just going to dive right into it and see where the conversation goes. So let's do it.
Yeah, I'd love that. Well, I was just thinking that I'm about 18 months in, and it's kind of this point where you can take a breath and reflect and really process. How is it different than you expected when you had that deer in the headlights moment when you got the diagnosis? And so that's really what prompted me to think about this topic.
I love it. All right, so I guess let's just start at the top of your list. What do you think is one thing that just has been so different or maybe has gotten way easier?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that easier because I do place it in three buckets. You know, the things that are harder than I thought that they were going to be. Because really in that moment of, you're receiving the first time diagnosis for your child, all these things flash into your head. And so you've got these things that you think are almost insurmountable, and yet still you find out they get even harder. And then there are a whole bunch of things that turns out to be way easier, right? Because people are incredibly adaptable and it's amazing what we're capable of, right? So it's way easier. And then I think the third category of, okay, it's about exactly what I expected, right?
Yeah.
And all of these things are probably different for everybody depending on you and your experience, maybe what your knowledge was of T1D before hearing about the diagnosis and all of that stuff. So these are unique to me, but I'd be really curious to hear from listeners, where they feel like they compare in terms of their experience as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so curious to hear. And I agree, it's going to vary person to person and also in different seasons. I think there's even parts of diabetes for me that are easier right now, but unfortunately they will get harder again and then easier again, whether it's technology or trying new technology or, technology having issues because of bad batches or, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Things definitely go in waves, so it's not always forever, but I do think over time, diabetes has gotten more manageable. Even if you don't think easier is the right word, it's like we can handle it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great word, seasons, because I think that as even 18 months in, you kind of have that, I shouldn't call it the honeymoon season because that's not fun at first, but it's that first time as you're sort of learning diabetes and your relationship with diabetes. And then once that passes, you kind of get into the next phase of your life, and then you challenge yourself in new ways, challenge yourself to learn maybe the technology or, behind the different devices that you use, and that's its own season, etc. But anyway, so let's jump into it, shall we? I think that I'll start with the stuff that is maybe a little bit harder than I thought that it was going to be. And the first one that came to mind for me is that, that first week I was learning about injections and we had two kinds of insulin that we were on, the long acting and the short acting. And I just thought to myself, once we get on devices, it's all going to be easier. Right? It's all going to be easier. And by and large it is. But I did not expect the challenge of site changes. And first of all, I don't know what I thought, but I kind of thought that like the Omnipod, you would stick it on and it'd be on for, I don't know, a month. 6 months. I didn't know. Nobody knew, right? Like I don't know. I'm new to all of this. And then when I found out, no, you've got to change the site every 3 days, I thought to myself, well, that kind of sucks. Really expected it was going to last longer than that. I still got
Yeah.
to deal with this every 3 days and then give my daughter this painful, like this loud clicking sound as it snaps into place, right? And obviously, it's better than getting poked with needles multiple times a day, without question, right? But I really did think that once we got on the device, it was just going to be like, oh, I can sit back and relax, and the device does all the things, and it doesn't do a lot
Mm-mm.
of the things, right? So it's wonderful. It's a marvel of technology, and it's still a little bit harder to keep track of than I thought that it was going to be. And then watching her reaction every 3 days as we argue over where to place the pump, and her refusing to use some sites, and us having to bribe her through ice cream or any means necessary to agree to a certain site over another. That was way harder than I thought that it was going to be. I mean, it's something that is still an ongoing struggle that I hope she grows out of eventually, but we're still there.
Yeah. I really like that you brought this up, especially just that feeling of expecting the pump to kind of be this overall fix and just doing a lot of the work for you.
Hmm.
I want parents to hear. I mean, Type 1 Together as a whole, we really believe in pump technology and you can have great management without it, but we do see a lot of parents having an easier time and kids once they're able to get on a pump for a lot of different reasons. However, on the technology part of the pump, like we're not just talking about site changes here, there's things that
Hmm.
you need to learn, right? There's a lot that we input into the pump. It's not just as simple as turning it on and expecting it to do everything for you. And I think that is sometimes lost in the communication about what a pump is going to be. And then we have all these parents that are messaging us frustrated that, well, I got on this pump, it has an automation, whether it's auto mode or control IQ or whatever. Why isn't it just giving us perfect blood sugars? It's supposed to do everything. It's the pump's fault. It's the pump's fault. But in reality, there's so much you need to do as a parent to learn about the actual technology and the algorithms, which is exactly why we put on both of our master classes for Tandem and for Omnipod to show what that actually looks like and how to get the results you want. But we always are going to have more information than this technology, or at least for a while, because even though it has all the tools in place, it doesn't know everything about your next move and if you're sick and if your child's stressed and what they're going through. So I don't know. I just had to say that because it's not going to fix everything in that way, but it can if you take a little time to actually understand how the algorithm works. But yeah, with the pump changes or the site changes and site locations, that I know can be really challenging and for a long period of time. It was for me as a kid, so that makes sense. It's hard.
Yeah. And to clarify, if you're new to diabetes and you're just looking at technology right now or just thinking about it, you should absolutely 100% get on a pump, right? I'm not saying that the pump is not worth it. It is life-changing in the freedom that it affords. But to your point exactly, it still requires education and discipline. And even 18 months in, I still don't feel like I understand all of the settings that the pump has to offer. And we're constantly getting better at it all the time. And there's sort of a new phase to your life, I think, that forms when you realize that you don't have to check in with your diabetes resource center about every little change that happens to the pump, right? And you can learn what works for you or your child, and you have the confidence to kind of make some of those changes to the equation on your own, and you should, right? But it takes time to get there. It won't happen overnight.
Yeah. What has the journey been like with site changes? Is it still something that your daughter's really scared of doing, or is it just more about changing the location that's hard?
I think it's a mental thing. It's just she always thinks that it's going to be painful, particularly if we try to convince her to go to a new location. We've been trying to get her to go on like her side or her back, and she's just not all about that. She just thinks that's going to be super painful there. And it's funny because some of the locations that she likes most are the locations that I hear people on Instagram in the comments say their kids most avoid, right? And I think that there's just this mental barrier around, whatever a site may or may not hold in terms of its pain level or its convenience when that it goes in. And so I think we've got the few locations that she prefers because they're what she knows, and then just trying to get her to get over that hump of this other place is hard. And a lot of times I'll even like place the pump and say, okay, I'm going to before I stick it on, I'll like hold it up to her arm and be like, okay, I'm going to put it here. And she's like, no, put it here. And then she moves it exactly to the spot that I was trying to avoid because there was already, an injection site there from the last time we had the pump there. Right. And so that's just, it's hard to really help them understand it's for their benefit. They just can't rationalize at a certain age that way, right? That it makes more sense to go somewhere else for their own benefit. And that's hard to remember. You're not always dealing with a rational being that is capable of that introspection quite as well as we are as fully grown adults, right?
I mean, I do that with myself. I, for years, had certain spots that I was only going to do when I was younger and my family was helping me. And now I know that I should be rotating more. But when I'm just like doing a quick site change and, maybe I have a certain activity happening in the next few days where I know it'll just be easier if I have it on my stomach again. But then I know that I had it there the last 3 times. Like, it's hard to get myself to want to do something different. And actually today I'm using a leg site. I did a leg site last time and it worked so well, which is rare for me. I actually had a couple of days in a row of 100% in range, and I was so confused because it's always so challenging on my leg. Well, this leg site, even though it's pretty close to the other one, is not working so well today. So it's that factor too. Am I going to have to deal with the actual blood sugar management being harder because that site isn't absorbing as well? So it's always something.
Yeah. And I think that especially when you're 18 months in, you're not getting the results that you're looking for in terms of the insulin suppressing the blood sugar. And you don't have enough experience quite to know, is it just because of this site? Is the insulin bad? Is it some other reason, hormones? Like who knows, right? And probably still you don't really know. But maybe over time you start to see the patterns emerge. And I feel like at 18 months we're still just a little early to diagnose the patterns.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hear the next one.
Yeah. So the other thing that I thought was harder, and I don't know, this may be kind of unique to us, but we had really hoped that we could shield our daughter from having a cell phone until she was older, and that went out the door, right? And we call this old-fashioned, but we had really hoped that we might get to like 14, 15 until giving her a cell phone, just because you hear all of these studies right now about social media and its impact on kids and how obsessed people are with their cell phones. And we just wanted her to experience being a kid and growing and maturing in that way and try to keep her off of a cell phone. And then when we switched to the devices, really explored all of the options. And then I could tell the nurse was trying to kind of steer us towards the phone. And we asked, well, how many other diabetics do you know that don't use a cell phone? And she was like, honestly, like almost none, right? And it's just so much easier if you're on the cell phone. So we caved and we got it. We've got it on way locked down, right? Where we've got the time capped off where she can't access certain things after a certain time at night and in the morning and so on. But I don't know. I feel like that's a little piece of innocence that was taken away from her earlier than we really wanted to. But again, it has been life-changing. I wouldn't do it any other way. But that has been a little bit harder, sort of shielding her from some of those things that we hoped that we could protect. Now, on the flip side, I feel like she's had to gain more responsibility and more maturity at an earlier age. And I feel like that's going to serve her well later in life. But it was certainly different than maybe we had hoped initially.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I did get a phone at a very young age, but it was a flip phone, and that was more just for communication with my family, and I wasn't allowed to text anyone else. But now with the Dexcom, you pretty much have to have, like, you couldn't get a flip phone, even though they still make them, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and then as a parent, like if you want the phone to send a signal to your phone, right? Like if you want to follow along with her blood sugar, she's got to have a cell phone.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But you're right. It is going to be great for her in the long run to have the extra responsibility, even though there's downsides to that as well. I think there's a reason why there's so many amazing humans that happen to live with type 1 diabetes. Like it puts you through a lot, and there's definitely pros with that.
You know what else surprised me? Like, I kind of felt like we should be able to reimburse our cell phone as a medical expense through insurance, but that's absolutely not a thing, unless somebody knows something I don't.
No, you absolutely should be able to. I think I have heard, maybe not though. I don't know. That's a good point. It really is one.
Yeah, I asked about that, and somebody gave me a crazy look, like,
No.
but I'd like to think so.
Yeah, okay, well, DM us, everyone, if you are listening and you've done that successfully.
Yeah, I'd love to know. We'll share it out, start a trend. So the other thing, and I think listeners will get a kick out of this one, I didn't realize how difficult it would be to change the mindsets of grandparents and caregivers of older generations on just how much more flexibility people have today than they did 40 years ago with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
Even if you find somebody that you really, really trust to watch your T1D, you still get calls and questions all the time, right? And so there's no time off really, and it's a 24/7 thing. So we'll leave our daughter with my mom, and she's terrific, right? She's one of the most loving, caring people I know, who's just terrific with children, and wants to be helpful in every way possible, and really listens and cares about getting it right. But still, she doubts herself sometimes in the care that she gives, and so even if we're having a date night, my wife and I, I'm still getting calls, I'm still getting texts, I'm still on the clock really with managing diabetes. So that's hard. I think when you first get the diagnosis, you recognize that your life has changed and that this is going to be really hard. And you're looking forward to the day maybe when you can get a little bit of independence, and build a network of other people that can help you. And that is helpful, and you should build that network. But then still, it's really hard to get to a point where you can be truly hands off. And I think a part of that, kind of a subset of that, is people who remember really tragic stories of people that they grew up with type 1 diabetes. And all of the knowledge that they bring with them from those experiences that is maybe outdated in terms of how diabetes is managed today. And just to say, no, it's okay that she has that cookie, it's okay that we go out for ice cream, it's okay to have those things, we've just got a dose for it. And then kind of maybe the judgment that you feel when you say those things, that's hard. It's hard to overcome that. That was really hard, and something I think we continue to struggle with.
Yeah, that I do think never ends with certain people. It's like no matter how many times you tell them that, they're just never going to understand. I recently heard someone explain diabetes in this way. I'm not going to remember exactly what they said, but they were explaining how, like, with type 1, I know we already all know this, but your body just doesn't make insulin, right? And so we're just like anyone else. We just have to give that insulin. Like when you explain it like that to someone else, not we can't have these carbs because like it is different than type 2 in that way. We're not necessarily resistant to insulin. Our body's working the same. We just don't have the insulin that you have. So if you can eat a cookie and your body gives insulin, why can't I eat a cookie and give myself the insulin? And that really clicks
Yeah.
for me. Like, yeah, it really is like that. Now, of course, finding the right amount of insulin and timing of insulin for that cookie is more challenging than in someone else's body. But yeah, it shouldn't be like that. And you're right about the 24/7 aspect of it. I mean, I love that you're such an advocate for type 1 summer camp, even overnight camp where they force you to not follow. And then, of course, the type 1 together babysitter list, if we have anyone in your area. I think those are good opportunities to be able to fully trust someone. But I can also understand from a grandparent or any other caregiver's point of view, like if you're handed a kid only even once a month, let's say, and you don't know anything about diabetes and you're given all this stuff, like it would be terrifying.
Yeah, and I don't want any grandparents coming at me. Like, I mean, grandparents, I so appreciate you. And I mean, if you're listening to this podcast now, I want to say that you are probably more involved and engaged than the average family member at supporting the type 1 in your life. So thank you for that. But it is something that as a parent of the T1D, you do feel like you're constantly educating others, and that's a chore. That is a tax on you as a parent, right? That you have to be doing that education. And I gladly do it, because if people want to learn, I want to take the time to explain to them and help them understand. But if I was in their shoes, or if I was in the shoes of, if I didn't know anything about T1D and somebody gave me their kid and say, hey, watch this person, I'd be scared to death, right? I would probably be also calling and texting and making sure that I got it right. So I don't blame you, but it's just another thing that parents go through. And I want to share this story really quickly. A few weeks ago, I was having dinner with my parents, and they were explaining to me for the first time, which is kind of incredible that this story hasn't come up before now, but I had some great cousins. I'm not sure what the relation is. It was my grandma's sister's children, if you can kind of do the math. And they were both diagnosed with T1D decades ago, and they both died in their 20s. And I told my parents, like, how come I'm not hearing about this until now? And they were like, well, they died young. You weren't even born yet. You didn't know them. You had no frame of reference for them. It's just something, but it was a big deal in that at that time. I remember when so-and-so, we got the call that she had passed away due to complications from diabetes. Her brother, actually, who also had T1D, gave up at 18 and just started drinking and partying and doing all the things because he was so fed up with trying to manage diabetes because it was so intense back then. And so now you've got this story, these two people that I'm connected to through blood who had this, and then I'll never know them. Their story will never be complete because they died so young. And if as a grandparent, if that's the perspective you're coming with, like, oh my gosh, I knew these people that I was close with and they died young, and that's the last thing that I want to happen to anybody else in my family. I think that adds a little bit perspective and empathy for how intensely they must feel about the decisions that we make in managing diabetes. So just all due respect for that.
Oof. That's so true. That's interesting. I think I also have heard from my grandparents that there were some people like way before our time in our family who also did have type 1 and didn't live very long because it just wasn't possible. And it's also just interesting to think about how type 1 can kind of travel but like skip generations almost and still make its way. And also on my dad's side, which I know can be more common. So that is interesting. Yeah. Okay, so what about like mental health wise? Do you feel like it has gotten easier overall for you as a parent? I guess for your daughter and for you. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that's different than we expected from when the diagnosis first came along is the strain that T1D can put on the relationship between parents. And I didn't realize at the time just how important communication is between the mother and father, or whatever your situation is in terms of the two partners that are caring for that T1D. I can't overstate the importance of communication. And even me saying that, I don't communicate enough with my wife, nor does she with me, probably, on the decisions that we're making with diabetes all of the time. It is so hard to manage it together. Sometimes we joke that it's easier for me to just manage it for the day, or her to manage it for the day, but us both to try to manage it for the day, texting the school or talking to the babysitter, whatever. And I think that's a big reason that, in our case, my wife, she does the lion's share of the communicating with the different caregivers in our daughter's life. And sometimes I feel bad about that, but then I think I don't want to insert myself into the process because I don't even know everything she's got cooking and the pieces she has moving at this time. And I can really see how dads can get marginalized in that equation because it doesn't take very long and you feel so far out of the loop. Like, I don't even know where to contribute or how to contribute because I just don't know what's happening, right? And so really, we have had to work to keep those communication channels open. That was and continues to be harder than I expected when we first got the diagnosis, but I think it is critical to improving that mental health picture that you talked about. Our mental health improves in terms of our relationship with each other and our relationship with our daughter and T1D when we are all on the same page, sharing, what the latest is in how we're approaching her treatment and why we made the dosing decisions that we did, and staying up to date on how are you calculating carbs for that breakfast, right? Because I want to make sure I'm doing it the same way because you did a pretty good job. She stayed in range yesterday. I want to do the same thing today. But that takes constant work to do that. And I do think there's a direct correlation in your ability to communicate and the robustness of your communication and your mental health at managing this together.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a whole episode on this at some point, but I am curious, are there any tactical things that you have implemented to make that possible? Like when you say keep the communication open, is that you being added to like a group chat that's happening with the school, or are you like asking her once a week in the morning? Like what kind of things are you doing to figure out the breakfast dose and all of that stuff?
Yeah, well, I do think it starts with being asked to be added to the chat. So if you're communicating with the school nurse, could we just get a group chat where the three of us are on that, right? So it's not just you and me. For the things that I'm not included on, I do think it's a little bit of a debrief. Like when I come home from work, tell me what were your conversations with the school today, or a little bit of positive reinforcement, like I said, like, oh, you did a really nice job dosing for breakfast this morning, how did you do it? I mean, people want to know, like, give me some recognition, right? Some approval that shows that you actually care and that you recognize how hard your partner worked to make that thing happen, right? And also the vulnerability to say, like, hey, I tried to dose our daughter before we went out for ice cream. I got it wrong. What do you think that we should have done differently, right? So just taking those moments to debrief and talk about it, and then also check in throughout the day, send each other text messages and kind of let them know, hey, here's what I did and why. I do think also it's sitting down and looking at the device together, and like we talked about all of the settings that are required in your pump. Like, let's talk about together, what is the insulin to carb ratio and why is that important? And what do you think we should change it to? Well, I think we should change it to this. And why do I think that? Coming to those decisions in a mutual conversation, just including the other person to be a part of those conversations so that you understand not just what the change was, but why, and that you both committed and agreed to it together. That is tremendously helpful, because then it's a mutual thing. It's not one person versus the other in terms of I did more than you or I made a better decision than you, right? You're in it together.
Yeah, I love that. It is so crazy to think about having another person in my management. Like, it's such an added complexity to the already difficult situation. It's funny that you kind of joked about like you do it for a day and then I do it for a day. Like that might be easier. I was literally thinking when we started this conversation, like, I wonder if that's something you or any other parent has ever done where you say like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is my day, and like splitting up the days so that it's not too many people in the pot. Have you ever done anything like that? Or like what does a handoff look like if there is one?
We've done like if my wife goes on a girls' weekend or something like that, I'll be like, I've got it for the weekend. Try not to look at it. Try not to worry about it. I'll manage it during this time. We haven't tried yet, like, hey, I'll take Monday, you take Tuesday. Maybe that's something we should try. I don't know. Maybe I'll try it and then report back next time. But other than pockets here or there, I can't say that we've done it on a consistent schedule. I think it'd be a great idea, though.
I would be interested for parents to try that. I know it really depends on your work situation. Like if both parents are working or one is home and they're able to really pay attention, obviously that would just make more sense. But maybe even on a weekend, like a Saturday versus Sunday, maybe you're both with the kids all day, but one person's in charge because, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, it's exhausting for you to both be doing it all the time. And then you're always having to communicate all the little intricacies within that day as well. Also think we hear from a lot of moms, especially on some of your posts you've made in the past, that the dad is not helping and the dad's not contributing. And maybe if they're only available on the weekend with you, like that is an opportunity for them to contribute. But part of that equation is you allowing them to try and potentially mess up. I know Amanda and Danny have recorded a few episodes really talking about this as well. If you're not in the day-to-day management of type 1 all the time, it's just natural that you're not going to understand the flow of it all, and you're maybe not going to be as successful on day one. And so if you're a mom listening and you never give your partner the opportunity to try, even if it means a little bit of turbulence in the blood sugars, then they're never going to learn. So I do wonder if this kind of flip-flop switching off method could be helpful, even if it's just once a week or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think just trusting your partner and allowing some space for them to make mistakes and being okay with that, because that's how we learn, right? And I think it's important to note that all of this communication stuff is work. Like, is it easier for just the mom, to manage it all the time? Well, in the short term, yes, it is easier because you know everything, you've got control over the situation, it's hard to communicate, it takes additional time. Your partner may initially show more or less interest in, learning about it, right? So it's kind of frustrating. It is work to communicate that way. In the long run, though, it makes it easier. It improves the relationship. It gives you a partner that you can count on to be able to manage it. It's just so much better in the long term to have put in that work and that open communication. So I do think that it is important. And also I think it's important that you just realize the dad may not always get it right at first, and it's okay. You've gotta release control every now and then.
Yes. Amazing. Are there any other ones you had that you specifically wanted to share?
Yeah, so I've got a bunch of things that are actually easier. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about how much harder diabetes is than maybe we originally expected. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, there are things that turned out to be like, oh yeah, we got this. This is way easier. So I don't want to be one-sided. So I think one of the first things is I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, our daughter loves donuts and breadsticks, and this is going to be terrible. She's never going to be able to eat donuts again. It's her favorite food. How in the world are we going to be able to overcome this? But she eats all the breads, right? Like, like to our conversation earlier, you've just got a dose for it. And you gotta replace it with insulin just like the body normally would, right? But if you're worried about that, if you're somebody out there that's dealing with the diagnosis and it's fresh, like they can have all the foods. It's just you got to plan for it, right? I think the other thing is counting carbs. I thought we were going to have to do endless detail spreadsheets of all the carbs, of all the foods. I think I even still have spreadsheets of her most favorite foods and the exact carb counts according to all of these carb counters that we found online of what they were. We were really doing a lot of math in that first 6 months on exactly how many carbs we expect. Okay, there's 12 blueberries instead of 10. So, that should be so many carbs per blueberry or whatever it was. Now, you really do develop a sense for the art of carb counting. You could just kind of look at a plate and feel through the force how many carbs are in this plate, right? And once you get to that place in your life, it is a lot easier, I think, in terms of there's not so much pressure, so much stress, so much anxiety in calculating the dosage for the snack or whatever it is. You either remember the carbs of her favorite snacks or meals, or you just develop a sense of, okay, based on, where her blood sugar is right now and how much energy she's going to exert in the next hour and the direction of the wind and the phase of the moon, this should be about 43 carbs, right? You just feel it. And when you get to that point where you're kind of feeling and you're in the flow, then I think it's a little bit more fun to manage diabetes, and we have kind of enjoyed that phase.
I'm just so glad to hear you say that. I mean, that's what I talk about all the time. People joke that I bolus on vibes, but it works. It works once you start to understand that art. And I would ask you, like, with bolusing more in the art sense versus just like, this is exactly how much I need to give, are numbers better or worse than they were before?
Well, I'd say they're better because you sort of dismiss the notions of, what all the books and the manuals and the science says
Yeah.
should be the case. And you go based on what you're in your gut, as a parent and as a human being should be the case. And
Yeah.
it just turns out to be more accurate for whatever reason. And you kind of got to let that other stuff go.
Yes, it's because there's so many more factors than just the exact carb count. And, people get so stuck on, well, I gave the exact carb ratio that we've narrowed down with the endo for this exact amount of blueberries, it should have worked. But that's not how our bodies work, Things are always
Yeah.
evolving and changing in our bodies. So I hope that parents hearing that, it's just a breath of fresh air because, yeah, I haven't done math like that in forever. And while it can be helpful, especially in the beginning, that is such a heavy weight that was on me for so long. Like feeling the need to be looking up an exact carb count and just worrying about all of that. And it's been super interesting doing my new T1D taste test series where I try different foods and I post about it because a lot of people have been messaging me way more than I expected, mostly adults of type 1 saying, oh, I haven't had what did I have recently? An acai bowl in years. I haven't had a piece of pizza in years. Like, I'm so scared. And like, I can't believe it just like works out sometimes. And it's like, yeah, we really can have these foods and you really can figure it out. But it's not necessarily going to work out perfectly if you only look at the carbs. There's so much more there. And unfortunately, it can be scary when you're just giving insulin because you feel like your body needs more, but you kind of gain that background knowledge of why that is over time. And you're like, oh, well, I have been really stressed today and I can tell my blood sugar's been a little stickier today. And it's this time of the month for me as an adult, right? That also plays a role in it. And so I'm going to give 0.5 extra, And I know that sounds like crazy to some people, but that's how I get the blood sugars that I do. And so the fact that you're 18 months in and you're already feeling that way and you're probably doing less work overall, that's amazing. I'm so happy
Yeah.
for you all.
I mean, pay attention to those lived experiences that you've had in terms of like, just think about the last few days and how your child's blood sugar has reacted to whatever you did in those scenarios, and then use that information to make a different decision next time. And it's kind of like a little experiment. Well, maybe we'll try this and see if that works, right? And that's where I was talking about more of the fun, the puzzle, the game of it, right? I do think if you kind of look at it that way, it's a little bit healthier a mindset of you're really just trying to put the pieces together in a way that hits the target, and you're using the past results that you've gotten to kind of inform how you change going forward. And that is as good, if not better, than whatever the textbooks say that you should be dosing for.
Yep. Love it. Cool.
Yeah.
What else has gotten easier?
Let's see. I thought kids would be really, really mean, and they're not. And we've talked about this in the past, but kids are fantastic. And it warms your heart so much to see friends and other kids at school who are not even really friends with our daughter come to her defense and really support her and really respond with such curiosity and interest in the most beautiful, positive way, and want to be supportive. Yeah. It's been a blessing. I thought that the kids would pick on her and not want to be associated with her and bully her, and that hasn't been the case. And I don't think it's just our experience, because when I talk about this topic online, other parents chime in that kids and their friends are fantastic. So that has been one of the bright spots in humanity, really, as we've had this experience over the last 18 months.
That's amazing, and I completely agree. I mean, there are a lot of stories I've heard of kids getting bullied with type 1, but honestly, I never have. I mean, at least not to my face. I think, yeah, people just want to learn. They're curious, and if you're open to sharing, I think it only lets them in more, and it gives them more of a reason to not be like nasty about it. Like, everyone's just, they're trying to be supportive. So that's great.
Yeah, it has been really nice. And I do worry that someday there's going to be somebody that bullies that comes along, and hopefully she'll have the maturity at that point to deal with it, because she's got so many other people supporting her. As a dad, I don't know, have the weirdest feeling that someday there's going to be a boy that's not going to want to go on a date with her because she's got T1D. I don't know, probably people that are older that have lived with their whole lives. Like, you could share experiences of maybe things that have gone wrong like that. If it has, I don't know if I want to hear it. As a dad, I still like, I fear for those days. But then I know so many, but I don't know. I think maybe that's an internal fear because everybody finds their right person, right? That does understand and is supportive of. So if they're not somebody that's going to be
Yeah,
supportive, you don't need to be with them anyway, right?
exactly.
Yeah, so, I worry that those things will come up, but by and large, it's been phenomenal to see the response from other people her age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And to briefly answer your question, no, it has not been an issue at all.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah. And I actually just recorded an episode with Kevin that's coming out tomorrow from today. But if you're listening to this when this comes out, it'll be the week before. And I talk with him about his experience, like first getting to know me with diabetes, but also just like dating in between my more serious relationships. Like people didn't really care. But I think it's all about how
Mm,
you present
mm-hmm,
it. And
mm-hmm,
it can be a tricky one to present at first because it's hard to balance the like
mm-hmm,
diabetes is not a big deal and it's my everyday all the time. But
mm-hmm.
once you're able to kind of figure that out, it's good. It's a good filter because if you're with someone who doesn't accept you with type 1, they're not going to be a good person in
Yeah,
other ways. So I
yeah,
love that
yeah.
about diabetes. Yeah.
Love that. I've got
Cool.
two more
Another?
quick, easy ones. Yeah, so, I thought that we would be back in the hospital way more frequently. There's just
Mm,
something about all of the sense of urgency and seriousness in that first week of diagnosis, where, and then the stories you hear about people that have passed out or died.
yeah.
You get all of that information that is coming at you, and you kind of tell yourself this story like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen to my kid, and these crazy things. They're going to pass out on the playground, or they're going to throw up in the cafeteria, or we're going to be getting an ambulance ride back to the hospital. And none of that has happened. I'm not saying that it can't happen, and I'm not saying if you found yourself in that situation you're abnormal. But I am saying that with the miracle of modern technology and medicine, turns out to be way less than we were initially led to believe. So that has been a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Fun fact, I've actually never been hospitalized besides
Well,
when I was first diagnosed. So there you go.
there you go. And I hope that we continue that trend. I think if is barring anything crazy happening, I don't really see that it should happen. I mean, if
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the only time, like, if you have a really sick child who has a lot of ketones and they need fluids, like, that's a great time to
Hmm.
go in. And that's when I've almost gone in a couple times. But as long
Hmm.
as you're able to keep things under control in that way, I think it is pretty rare. And if that does happen, it doesn't mean you did something wrong or that it's your fault. Like, sickness with type 1 can be
Yeah.
really hard. But I think you're right. It's really rare.
And the technology, I mean, last night I almost dosed my daughter for 75 units of insulin instead of 0.75,
I've been
and
there. Yeah.
the pump won't even let you do it. Like, it's like, that's too much. We're not going to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then I think the last thing that's a little bit easier is, we really thought that we were going to be up 1 to 2 times a night for the rest of our lives, checking blood sugar and monitoring how she's doing, and that was just going to be our new life, that we were constantly have to get up in the middle of the night and check on her. And again, with technology, the SugarMate app has been fantastic in terms of giving you a call if she happens to be going low, and you can kind of see the trend where she's headed before she goes to bed. And we do wake up in the middle of the night. Every week we have nights where we wake up, but we also have a lot of nights where we get wonderful sleep. So that has been much better than expected.
Parents are going to be really relieved to hear that one, I think, especially the newer ones.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
good. Sleep is so important. Wow. Well, I really loved this episode. I guess before we sign off, anything you'd want to share if you're comfortable about like your daughter's experience with type 1? Do you feel like it has gotten easier for her?
It's interesting because before our podcast today, I was actually talking with her and I was kind of letting her know, hey, these are the things we're going to be talking about. What would you say is different than
Mm,
you expected? And I think the question was too big for her.
yeah.
It was, she was just like, she didn't even know what she was getting into, right? I mean, she just had no frame of reference for what life was going to be like. So she didn't really come into it with the same expectations that we had,
Mhm.
rather false expectations or otherwise. And in that way, I feel like diabetes isn't as challenging for her as we thought that it was going to be. And I feel like I've heard you and Emily talk about this, with your own experiences living with diabetes in terms of, it is what it is when you're growing up, right? And maybe we feel so bad as parents about what their experience is and how that may be different than what we grew up with as non-diabetics. But for them, it's just life, and you learn to adapt, and it's okay, right? They've got this. So I think that it has become easy because it is who she is, and she's proud of who she is, and she doesn't apologize for it. She doesn't try to hide her devices. She proudly wears breakthrough T1D t-shirts to school. She loves being an advocate and talking with others about diabetes, which I love her for. And not everybody's comfortable with that, so I understand, like, everybody's in a different place maybe with their comfort level talking about it with others. So no judgment there. But for her, I think that she gets a little bit of catharsis or pride in being able to be that spokesperson for diabetes and telling somebody about diabetes who doesn't have any past awareness of it. So I think that it has become woven into her identity in a way that she enjoys and makes her unique. And that's okay. And so in that way, once you get past the struggles of managing diabetes and the fact that the unfairness of it, if you want to call it that, and it becomes who you are, and you can kind of accept it and embrace it, then on the whole, it really changes your perspective on life, and it becomes a healthier relationship that you have with yourself and diabetes.
Yes, mic drop. I agree completely. And I love, like, people get really upset about the idea of diabetes being part of your identity, but I do believe that. And I don't think it has to be a negative thing. I absolutely think it's a part of who I am. It's something that's shaped me into who I am. And it's just the reality. Like, as much as we want to say it's not, it doesn't mean it's all that I am, but it is a part of who I am. So that's very beautiful. All right. Well, I guess we can do a blood sugar roll call together if you have your numbers.
Yeah, let's do it.
113 right now.
Ooh, we are at 79. She is out running errands with my wife at the moment. So they're just driving around in the car, going from store to store. So a little movement. I think that's helped to bring it down. But I don't want everybody to think it's been a perfect day. We've been up over 200 twice today. We
I
got
also
lucky right now.
Yeah, I had a little post-breakfast spike today that was not wanting to come down. So
Yeah.
we're not perfect over here. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really loved all these things that you shared. And now we need to have you back for maybe like in another 6 months or so and kind of see if your thoughts have changed from now. But I'm sure it's only going to
Yeah.
get better.
Yeah, we'll see what the next phase brings.
Yes, and we'll have you on for other things too. Anyways, all right, guys, thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate and review the show. It really helps us so much. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.